All, all right. All right. Hello and good morning, everyone. Had a little quick false start there, waiting for the stream to come up. It is Thursday, 10:30 a.m., and welcome again to our Google Cloud live stream sessions that we do on our Linux Academy YouTube channel. And if this is your first time here, welcome. What we've been doing for the past couple months or so is that from a learning perspective, we take different topics that you want to see on different Google Cloud subjects, whether it's beginner level, such as how do I do command line, to advanced level, such as continuous deployment pipelines, and we basically just do them live on camera. Our purpose has always been number one, to show off something new that people request, and also more importantly, to go over the learning process of how to learn this thing, especially if you come from the perspective of a newcomer to that particular field, which is kind of always one of the little underlying themes that we want to do. So, for today's stream, we had a number of suggestions of people wanting to see some stuff on App Engine, but also working with some of the Stackdriver tools, specifically Stackdriver Trace, Stackdriver Debugger, and Stackdriver I cannot say that word, error reporting. I get hung up on that. So what we're going to do today is we are going to do exactly that. We are going to take an App Engine application that we already have up and running, and I'll go ahead and share with you a script to go ahead and recreate it on your own end as well. And we are going to test the performance on it. I'm going to have everyone send some log entries over into it, and then we're going to break it and then see how we can find out what's broken and what we're going to do to fix it. And we're going to use the Stackdriver Trace, Debugger, and error reporting tools to go ahead and track, troubleshoot, and ultimately fix that. So I have a couple quick things before we get started here. Number one, I have some bad news and some really good news for you. The bad news is that next week's Google Cloud weekly update and also live stream are going to be the last ones we're going to be doing for that. So next week is our final round of live streams and weekly updates. But the good news, the really good news, is the reason that last week is our last week is because we are going to be actively working on hands-on labs for our existing Google Cloud course content and also future ones coming up. This is something that I've been wanting for a very long time, and I'm sure that my management is really tired of me saying, hey, when are you going to get Google Cloud Labs? It's coming. Cue the "it's happening" memes. But that is something that we're going to be actively working on. I've been having conversations with our lab team to get our Google Cloud Labs up and running. I don't yet have a timetable for when they'll be up and running, but we will be taking our previous Google Cloud courses and converting the exercises into hands-on labs. So yeah, I am insanely excited to be working on that. Also, just so you know, we have in our chat right now Ben Lambert. He is one of our other Google Cloud training architects. He actually knows a lot more about App Engine than I do. To be completely honest, App Engine is one of my weaker areas of Google Cloud expertise, being that I do not come from a developer background. Ben does come from a developer background, so he knows a lot more than I do. So in our interactive chat, feel free to ask any questions you may have. If I don't know it, I will punt it over the bin, and more than likely he will be able to answer the question for you. This is an interactive chat. If I have to just talk to myself, everyone's going to fall asleep. So if you have any questions or if you have any comments or just want to say how weird I look, that's fine too. You're not going to hurt my feelings. So I'd like to go ahead and start off before I get into the actual lesson itself. Something I always like to do from a chat perspective is ask where is everyone from and what is something new that you are working on or learning this week. For myself, what I've been kind of working on over the past couple weeks is really getting down deep about Python, basically. So I've mentioned before, I don't come from a developer background. I've dabbled in C++ and Python here and there, so I can kind of fake my way until I make it. But I've been really wanting to get really down deep with the fundamentals, like, why do we have parentheses here? And, like the core fundamentals of how Python works, and use that as kind of like a very slow, strong foundation beyond just kind of the quick fixes jumping into code of how that works. And something from a learning perspective is that it's sometimes you just have to learn something very quickly and get like the bare essentials to be able to do whatever it is that you got to do. And that's perfectly fine for, whatever reasons. Sometimes, though, if you want to get really, really deep and wide with knowledge about something, it's a very, very slow and painful process because you really can't take a shortcut on that. So it's frustrating. I've been kind of working on my Python knowledge for a while. And but yeah, it's been very good. I'm getting a very fundamental understanding about like really the main core concepts of how it works, and I'm probably going to bridge that over to some other topics so I can know more and be a better instructor as well. Yes, Ben Lambert did do our Cloud Engineer course, which I hear is pretty dang awesome and it's a really good first step for the certification track. I believe he's working on a Kali Linux course right now. I don't know if we can let that slip. Well, I just did. Sorry. Which basically lets you be an ethical hacker on a custom Linux distribution. So pretty eager to see that course when it comes out. And I know people have been asking for that for a long time. Okay, enough yapping. Let's just go ahead and jump into our demo today. So what we're going to do is we're going to be doing a little bit of App Engine standard environment. So we're going to do some fun App Engine tricks with that. But the main focus of today's lesson is going to be taking an App Engine application and using some of the Stackdriver tools to figure out what's going on with it, break it, figure out what's broken, and we're going to go ahead and fix that as well. And the three main services we're going to be using, we can see from our left menu here, is Stackdriver Trace, error reporting, and Debug, often referred to as Debugger as well. And what we're going to do is how these work is they have kind of overlapping purposes, but Stackdriver Trace essentially lets you take logs to your website or application, and it lets you see where performance bottlenecks are at. So when you're working with any sort of a web application or a mobile application, there's lots of different layers of different actions that app have to go through. And if some parts of access is taking longer than others, you want to know about that, know why customers are getting ticked off because your site is slow, and it gives you lots of good, deep interaction and insight of, hey, this is what's moving slow, so you can focus on making them not so slow anymore. Debug and error reporting is pretty much exactly as it says. If you have errors in your application, error reporting lets you see where those errors are at, and Debugger kind of goes hand in hand with it. That lets you get deep into your code, see where your errors in your code are taking place, and also gives you a lot more information about different programming concepts about call stacks, variables, and other things going on within your code as it's running live as well. And Debug's really cool in that you can actually debug your code while the application is running, pretty much just like a live insights with that, without having to turn anything off. Now, when working with these, with App Engine and these particular services, we need to be a little bit careful from a demo perspective in that if you don't come from a developer background, if you get deep into code, you're going to get lost really quick. So what we're going to do for this specific demo is we're going to kind of take a high-level approach. I'm going to try to do it from the perspective of someone who doesn't have a lot of coding experience. We're going to provide a lot of that stuff for you. So it's going to be a little bit high level. We're just going to kind of go step by step. And we'll see if we can get deep into code, but it's one of those things where you can lose someone very quickly if they don't come from that background. So we'll kind of see how that goes. So let's just go ahead and jump into this. If you want to go ahead and set up this environment yourself, in the video description, I have this script here that is basically in a public cloud storage bucket that I'll link to here in chat in a second. But what you can do is, if you want to follow along, maybe if you're watching this on the recording afterwards, if you run this script, it's going to go ahead and clone a GitHub repo, enable the appropriate APIs, deploy your application. It's going to go ahead and create the data store index for you as well. So with just one script, you'll have the same application up and running at the exact same point where you're working with right now. And the link to that is in the video description. I'm going to go ahead and link to it here in chat as well. If you want to go ahead and click on that link, you can download the script, and you can go ahead and follow along as well. Okay, so let's jump into this. What we're going to do, we already have an app running on App Engine standard environment already up and running. It's basically a very simple guestbook application. This is actually from a Google's GitHub repo that they developed on their end for practicing with. And I'm going to actually ask a favor of you all. I'm going to go ahead and paste this link here in chat. And if you have the ability to open up a separate tab from wherever you are at, go ahead and actually add a few guestbook entries in here. And the reason we want to do that is that we actually want to generate some logs of people accessing the application, so we can take some of those entries and troubleshoot where possible performance bottlenecks are at. So I'm just going to type in just some other ones here. You can log in with your Google account if you want to. You can also do anonymous as well, whatever floats your boat on that. I'm just going to do a few entries myself. If I refresh my page and other people type in here as well, I should be able to see their entries here too. And it's about a 20-second stream delay, so you may just now be seeing this. Okay, some other people are saying hello. Awesome. If you don't mind just doing a few more entries on that, just so we can go ahead and generate some logs that we can use for a trace, we can go ahead and do that. Okay, cool, awesome. Got some logs generated. So we have an application here that we are generating some logs, and there are a number of layers you go through. When you add an entry, it's going to go ahead and generate an entry into data store, which is a NoSQL backend database, which is where the entries are being stored at. There's the actual web front end, and so there's a number of different layers that you have to go through before you're done doing whatever it is that you want to do. So if a performance bottleneck pops up and it's taking slower than you want it to, you need to know exactly what to focus on to troubleshoot, hey, this little piece of whatever is taking longer than it should be, so we can go ahead and focus on that. Stackdriver Trace is what's going to allow you to be able to do that. So to check out Stackdriver Trace, if you go to our top left menu, scroll down to Stackdriver, click on Trace here, all of the inputs that you generated are generating different log files here as well. So let's see, at about 1042, I'm seeing a bunch of different inputs here. These are our different data points. If we click on any one of these, it gives us more information as well. Now, we have our initial spike when I first created the application, which kind of throws off our graph a little bit. So I'm going to actually just kind of click and drag over the other entries here as well. And that kind of gives us a more realistic view. And we have a number of data points here as well. And it looks like we have a number of entries kind of in the 80 to 120 millisecond range, which, you know, milliseconds count, so maybe that's something we want to focus on. So this is real-time input of what different log inputs are taking more time than others in our application. If we click on any one of these, looks like these are all with the slash sign. This is basically the input of you adding an entry to the guest book and it registering it with data store on the back end. We can see that a fairly sizable chunk of a lot of these is the put command within data store. So if I click on a number of these, we have a fairly outsized bar graph of essentially data store accepting our entry. So it kind of seems that clicking on a number of these, any performance bottleneck we have at the moment is dealing specifically with adding your entry to our data store index. So the insight we get from this is that, okay, we're getting response time over 40, 50, 100 milliseconds. Where's the hang up? Where's the bottleneck at? It looks like it's on the back-end data store end. So maybe a troubleshooting tip would be maybe start indexing or not, start caching your indexes as opposed to using a non-cache version, and that would cut down on your performance time a lot. Now, if you weren't using Stackdriver Trace, you wouldn't really know where your performance bottleneck is at. So this basically tells you this is what you need to focus on to basically slim down your application a lot better. So that's Stackdriver Trace. You can get a lot more further into the code. We're not going to really mess with that for now, but the main thing to take away is that working with Stackdriver Trace lets you identify performance bottlenecks. And in this case, we would need to focus on our back end and kind of get that slimmed down further from there. Now, from the learning how to learn perspective that we always talk about in these demos, it's kind of one of those things where if you come from a development background, it's a lot easy. If not, it's actually really hard. Quite frankly, my best method of getting up to speed with it is to basically just do it. If you do a Google search for Google Cloud Stackdriver Trace, it kind of goes into the documentation there. It gets very code heavy and very developer heavy. So again, depending on your perspective and your background, it may be a little bit easier or harder for you. My best learning method was to just do exactly what we're doing right now, create an application, generate some log entries, and then basically just kind of poking around from there. So great, we now did trace. Let's go ahead and look at the other two Stackdriver entries in error reporting and debugger. But to do that, we have to first break our application, which is always a fun thing for me, which is essentially breaking stuff. So within my Cloud Shell session, I have my code that I was using to deploy over to App Engine itself. I'm going to go ahead and take a look at that right now. I have a version 1 of our application up and running right now. But I'm going to go ahead and dig down into my code. Here's our HTML page. You know what? I'm going to go ahead and edit our HTML page a little bit as well. I'm going to just change some of our simple text. See, if I do a search for the word guest book, I'm going to call this App Engine Guest Book version 2. You know, I kind of also feel like changing the background color to something a little bit more garish. You know, I'm kind of feeling a green background right now. So I'm making a few updates to my code here. But for whatever reason, I went into my guestbook.py file, and for whatever reason, I may have just typed in too many times. Instead of importing WebApp2, it's going to be WebApp22, which doesn't really exist. Don't get too hung up on what the individual code does. Just know this is going to basically break your application. So I have a typo in my Python code here used to deploy the application, and I have some changes to my actual website as well, some different background colors, some different text. Let's go ahead and deploy a new version of our application and see what happens, and then see how we can go about fixing that. First thing I got to do is get into my folder itself. And I'm going to go ahead and deploy a new version of our application. I'm going to go ahead and call this version 2. Now, we're not getting too deep into App Engine in this particular demo. If you do want to learn more about App Engine itself, another one of our training architects, Joe Lowry, has an App Engine deep dive course in which he goes basically really deep into App Engine. Let's see. Need to get a little typo here. Here we go, version 2. But if you're a Linux Academy subscriber, you can do a much deeper deep dive into App Engine, about kind of what we're kind of glossing over now to figure out how to create your configuration YAML file, what the different tags mean, and stuff like that. So we are deploying a version 2 of our application that we know is going to be broken in advance, and we're going to see how we troubleshoot that. Siva asks, wondering how we can edit in Cloud Shell. Very good question. So I think about a year ago, Google released a code editor option within Cloud Shell itself, which is actually quite handy. So we're in Cloud Shell here, obviously. If you go to this little pencil-looking icon on the top right here, if you click on that, that'll basically bring up an editor for everything within Cloud Shell here. So everything in your directory here, you can also see up here as well. So for instance, in our bottom section, we have our guestbook.py files, index.yaml. These are the exact same files here. It's pretty simple. You just browse down and you just make your edits. Now, there is no save button, so just whenever you type, it saves it automatically. So it's almost kind of like Google Docs in that regard, so be careful with that. But yeah, you can actually go ahead and just click on whatever files you want in the Cloud Editor, just directly type inside of it. It automatically saves, and it's actually really good for making quick edits on the fly. If you're working within Cloud Shell without having to upload and download files, or maybe having to use Vim to edit your files, this is a lot easier to work with. So good question on that. Okay, so we have deployed our application. If we go into App Engine and go to our versions, we have an error. Let me refresh that and hope our versions show up. There we go. We have a version 1 and a version 2. Version 2 that we just deployed is receiving 100% of our traffic right now. We may play with traffic splitting here in just a moment. But if you go back in that application I sent you, we have a server error. Something broke. So we have a server error. Something's broke. Oh my gosh, what do we do? You know, we have to figure out what's going on with it. I'm going to go ahead and refresh my page a few times to generate those errors. And how do we find where our error is at so we can go ahead and fix that? Well, that is where Stackdriver error reporting and Debug come into play. Let's go ahead and demonstrate that real quick. If you go to our top left menu, go back to Stackdriver yet again, click on error reporting, we have an error. Generated, Okay, that one was last seen 9 minutes ago. Let me refresh here, because that should not be correct. And let's see, we're getting a 500 server internal error. I don't know why it says 9 minutes ago, because we did just now generate it. But let's see. Value error answers cannot be an incomplete key. That seems a little bit interesting. 10:41 a.m. Let me go ahead and see if we can generate a few more recent errors, because it should immediately report it. Hopefully we're not running into a demo fail here. Let's get back into error reporting and see if we have a more up-to-date report. That is very odd. We did not get the error that we were expecting here. Gotta love it. The demo fail gods are not with me today. Let me go ahead and redeploy that application one more time to get it to behave that way we want to. Let's see. Went to guestbook PY. Got an incorrect entry on here. Let me go ahead and deploy this one more time as version 3. So what should be happening, and it works when I did the dry run for practice last night, is that it should tell us that the error occurred in this line here, that there is no web app 22 for it to bring in. And we're going to see if the demo gods are with me today. Let me go ahead and get back into here again. We should have a version 3 right now. Yes, we do. Let's go ahead and refresh a few times to see if did we save it before? It actually saves automatically. So if I actually click out of here and then click back into that, we should still say, where does it say web app? Web app 22 right here, which is still incorrect. Generate a few more errors, and let's hope the demo guys are with me today. Okay, running into a demo fail. Very, very fun. Okay, let me see if I can go ahead and create a different type of error that it will show up with. Ben, if you know I may be off here a little bit, feel free to pipe up. So what I did when I dry runned it last night was I pretty much just did exactly what you see right now. I just basically typed in web app 22 versus web app 2, and when I deployed it, what should happen is that when you go into it, it will tell you exactly where your error is occurring within the guestbook.py file. Can't import web app here. Maybe I typed it in the wrong spot. I'm going to try one more item here just to see if we can get this working. Trying to do like very, very small errors that you can easily troubleshoot. We'll do this without a version number. If it doesn't work this time and the demo guys are not with me, we may just go ahead and have to work around it. Okay, let's see if we can go ahead and get it to break properly for us so we can go ahead and demonstrate it. Back in the App Engine. Refresh it a few more times, get some more errors. I may look in our Stackdriver logging as well to see if we can get any particular log files within there. Okay, it broke properly this time. Gotta love when that happens. Okay, this happened just now. Actually says it was 4 minutes ago, so maybe there's just a little bit of a delay with it. Maybe we just weren't being patient enough. So that could possibly be the case. Okay, so import error, no module name web app 22, which is getting our server error. So we go from I have absolutely no idea what's going wrong to this item just happened now. And of course, if you're working on a team of people, you could either set the resolution status as either acknowledged, resolved, or just open. Kind of gives a group of people an idea of, hey, has someone else acknowledged this and are they working on it? No one has at the moment. And if you click on this, get a little bit more information. It says, of course, when the errors occurred. Yeah, it looks like there's a little bit of delay, so I just wasn't being patient with it. And it looks like I refresh it. Maybe you all refresh it as well. So it's just now generating those logs. I probably just was not being patient enough. Bad on my part. And it gives you data such as no module named web app 22. So it's telling us where the issue is at. And it's telling us that it's in the guestbook.py file, line 25. Okay, so this is very helpful. We're getting an internal server error. I don't know what went wrong. Using the error reporting service, it says the error you're getting for that internal error is web app 22 doesn't exist. And here's where the issue is located at. If we click on this link right here, that will automatically take me into Stackdriver Debug, which is our other service. And it's actually even helpful enough to take you directly to the line where you are having the issue at, saying, hey, this is not correct. Now, this particular code is bringing up right here is the source code that's running in the App Engine application itself. If you're running a Kubernetes cluster, it'd be a little bit different from there. So the vernacular may be a little bit different depending on how you're deploying your application, whether it's App Engine, Kubernetes Engine, Compute Engine, whatever. App Engine's a lot easier to demonstrate, so we're working with that today. So, okay, this tells me exactly where my error is at. Here is all the logs. So, bunch of errors here. So, okay, I know what I need to fix. So, back in my guestbook.py file, there is no web app 22. I'm going to go ahead and remove the second two on that. I'm going to go ahead and deploy my app one more time. I lost track of what version I'm on. We'll just say version 5. If you don't specify a version, it'll just automatically generate a number for you. Going to deploy it again. JJ, that's not very nice. Why don't you like Google Cloud? How's it blasphemy? I'm just giving you a hard time. I'm a Google Cloud fanboy. I know people like the other cloud platforms as well. Whilst applying, looking at some of the other comments here. Can we step into each line of code during debug? Yes, you can. Now, Ben, you may need to help me out here. But once we verify this is working with the incredibly horrible background, I'm going to go ahead and take a look into that as well, just to kind of see how the live debug works. Okay, so we just deployed our application again. It should be working this time. If we go back into App Engine, click on our app again. Now it's getting an error again. Let's check our versions here. Did we not deploy correctly? We did a version 5. There we go. Oh, you work for AWS. That makes sense. All right, we are still getting an error on here. Let's see, what might I have done wrong? Let's see. Oh, I put a 2 after Jinja as well. So, my mistake. I could have gone to error reporting after a couple of minutes and see where that was at. Let me go ahead and deploy that one last time. We'll do version 6. The demo gods may yet still be with me. This will work with any other apps. So the reason we're doing with App Engine, just from a demo perspective, is that Stackdriver Trace, error reporting, and debug are turned on by default. So there's just less stuff you have to do, especially from a demo perspective, just deploy the app and boom, there it is. You can very easily, well, I want to say very easy, but you can also enable it for compute engine applications, Kubernetes applications, all the above. There's just a little bit more work because it's not on by default. It's one of those deals where you kind of have to go into the Google Cloud documentation for adding those Stackdriver tools into your own particular application. So yeah, see if that kind of answers your question too. By default, all this is turned on for App Engine, Compute Engine, and Kubernetes Engine. There are more steps required. You know what? I'm going to go ahead and take a little sidetrack here and just link you to the info for that. So let's just say Compute Engine. We'll say Stackdriver error reporting. Setting up on Google Compute Engine, Stackdriver error reporting, and the steps may be similar for Trace and Debug as well. Basically, you have to manually enable it. This does get deep into the code for doing it. Let me go ahead and link that in the chat for, this would be example for Compute Engine. If you want to find out for Kubernetes Engine as well, basically doing a Google search for Stackdriver error reporting, Kubernetes Engine, usually the first result would take you directly to the Google Cloud documentation for setting it all up. So excellent question on that. Okay, so my application should be working again this time. Let's go ahead and check that out. Oh, good, it works, and the background looks fabulous. Yes, I know it looks horrible. I just wanted to test it out. We have our App Engine Guestbook version 2. We have a wonderful, whatever the heck shaded green that background is. I was going to do magenta, but I thought I wouldn't be that mean. And we're back up and working again. One last trick I wanted to do with the App Engine side is that I want to kind of show off how vert traffic splitting works. That's kind of one of those little neat App Engine tricks that you can do. So if we go into our versions, we have 1, 2, 3, randomly assigned number, 5, and 6. Let's say if I wanted to split traffic between a couple different versions of your App Engine application, it's actually insanely easy to do so. And this is one of those reasons why I really like App Engine a lot, is App Engine is kind of referred to as serverless before serverless was cool, in that there really is very little configuration from the management side to do different stuff. So for example, if I wanted to split traffic to this application, say I want 50% of people to go to version 6, 50% of people to go to version 1, I would add an additional version, simply change the slider from one over to the other. We'll do it by randomly assign, so if you just hit refresh, it'll go from one version over to the other. That's 5149, close enough. And then if we go into our app and then hit the refresh button, it should, in theory, we did save, right? Let's go back here. We are about 50-50. There we go. If you hit refresh, it should approximately 50% of the time go from one over to the other. Yes, canary deployment. Now, interesting point you bring up, Allport. There is on both the Cloud Engineer and the Architect exams, there are questions you might see addressing specifically that, where a scenario is that you're deploying an update to your App Engine application, and for whatever reason, it's a risky update, but it can only be deployed in a production environment. The question may ask the proper way to go ahead and deploy that canary deployment without messing anything else up. And the correct answer is actually using the traffic splitting that we're doing exactly right now for your canary deployment in order to slowly introduce that in. So let's go ahead and do a new version of our app here. And I want to go ahead and demonstrate that. Let's go back into our HTML file. And I'm going to go ahead and let's just go ahead and change our background color to something a little bit less garish. Kind of a light gray would work with that. I'm just using a color code color picker here just so I know which one I'm doing. We'll paste that in there. I'm going to go ahead and just for demonstration's sake, I'm going to go ahead and change this from App Engine Guestbook. We're just going to go ahead and call this Risky Update. So I'm going to deploy this into a live environment, but I don't want it to be the primary one that all traffic goes to by default. This is a risky one. I want to slowly ramp up people being introduced to it to see if there's additional errors. Let's go ahead and do that real quick. So I'm going to go ahead and deploy a new version here again. I'm going to go ahead and call it, I think we can just do a word. We'll just say risky. Probably poor best practices, but just kind of keep consistent. But I'm also going to go ahead and give it the tag of no promote. And what this does is when I deploy this application, traffic's not going to be going to the new version by default. It's only going to be going to the previous version. It's going to basically be kind of in waiting for you to direct traffic to it. So I'm going to go ahead and deploy this. It's not going to be sending traffic to the new version of that application by default. And once it's done, we'll go back to our version screen and see what we get. So we're back in versions. Let's refresh, see if it shows up. Risky. That's probably poor practices, but we're going to stick with the theme. Okay, so right now we have half of our traffic going to version 1, the regular background, half our traffic going to version 6, the bright green background, and no traffic going to our risky update. So if we want to do canary testing, that's a key term there, a canary deployment, and that's the term you may see on the exam as well. Okay, we want to send maybe 5% of our users to this risky update and see if anything starts breaking. To that, you go to splits traffic. We would add a new version. Our new version is going to be risky. And let's just go ahead and move this slider to be 5%. I'm just going to type in there since I can't do that very good. And looks like our other slider's a little bit off. Okay, we'll kind of mainly do that. We'll have about 50% to version 6, 45% to version 1, and 5% to our risky canary deployment. So now, if we go back to versions, refresh, that should say 5% there. And in theory, every about 1 in 20 times, it should go ahead and go to our canary update. Okay, we had a risky update right there, so we hit the 5% mark. Only about, it's not going to be exactly 5%, but roughly 5%. This lets you slowly move in a riskier update, and if nothing breaks, you can then slowly move your little sliders, have that be your full version. If something does break, you can very easily go back in, roll everything back. In fact, I want to roll everything back to version 1. Roll everything back, and just like that, we have now rolled everything back to our original version, or whatever version you want, 100% of your traffic, really through click and point slider. So it's actually insanely easy to go ahead and be able to do that. So very good question on that. Let's see. Siva asked how to remove our application from App Engine so it becomes more like a default page as like before deploying the app. Very good question. It's actually very different compared to the other services. The short version is there's two different things you can do. People tend to not like the answer, but that's how Google Cloud has designed it. Number one, you can just disable your application. You can't actually delete an app from App Engine entirely. The only things you can do is, number one, disable the application, which effectively deletes it. But assuming that you're working in standard environment, you won't get charged because it will scale back down to 0, so it's basically just kind of idle. The other recommendation is to just delete your project entirely, which seems a bit like a little bit of a nuclear option, but you can't just delete your app from App Engine. You either have to disable it or you have to delete the project entirely. Why that is, I don't know. That's just how App Engine is designed, and Ben gave a much better answer than I did. Yes. Ben, yeah, what Ben said, I think is kind of in line with what I said. Yeah, exactly. So you can disable your application, or you have to delete the project entirely, and that's that. And can you map this app URL to your domain name through Google Cloud? Yes, you can. You would not want to have this app spot URL here. You can map it in DNS. Typically, how you would want to do that is use your DNS settings as, like, say, maybe mystore.yourdomainname.com. I believe if you want to do a different domain name entirely, I'm not 100% sure. Let me go ahead. Let's go ahead and actually look it up real quick. It's a good question on that. So we're going to say App Engine. We'll just say App Engine DNS settings or a DNS redirect. And I am actually reading along with this with you. That is actually a really good question. Looks like you can set up a custom domain within App Engine. So you go to the custom domains page, or is that through Cloud DNS? I'm not 100% sure. Okay, it is an App Engine. So if you went to App Engine, Settings, Custom Domains, you'd be able to add a custom domain, or if you don't already have a custom domain, you could register a new domain, which probably goes through Google's DNS or Google's domain registration service as well. So that'd be the answer right there. Let me go ahead and link that to you in chat because I was not 100% familiar with that myself. If you'd like to explore more, that's where you can go ahead and do that. All right, well, I have run out of stuff to talk about. Thank you for the excellent questions here. Just to recap what we did is we worked with the App Engine standard environment and talking specifically about the Stackdriver performance and error debugging tools within App Engine, which you can trace and look for bottlenecks within your application. We also use Stackdriver error reporting and debug to find things broken in your application and give us a lot more detail to be able to drill down where exactly your errors are at so you know where to look and go ahead and fix it as well. Allport asked an excellent question. Is App Engine always tied to data store as a backend, or can we pick Cloud SQL? Yes, you can. You can choose any backend that you want. Now, what's funny is that when Google Cloud very first came out, the very first services available was App Engine paired directly with data store. Of course, it's changed over time. Yes, you can use any backend you want. So, excellent question on that. The process for doing that gets a little bit more into the code heavy stuff, which maybe leave to Ben to answer because I'm not 100% familiar with that. But yes, you can do any backend that you want. Oh, somebody asked before I forget, can you use it, debug to live check your code as it's running? I want to go ahead and demonstrate that real quick, and I may need to lean on Ben for a little bit more details on how it works. Let's go back into debug because I don't want to leave that question unanswered. So what you can do in debug, you can do a live snapshot of a particular line of code to get information about what's happening when that code is called upon. So for example, if I go to guestbook.py here, I'm going to go ahead and click in. Let's just go ahead and work with the guestbook error issue itself. And it's waiting for a snapshot to hit. And if we go back to our application, refresh it a few times, it's going to live generate some logs for that piece of code and everything that's going on within it. And if we go back to it, we should have some output here. All right, I may not be doing this correctly. Usually when that particular piece of code is called upon, it should go ahead and generate logs for it. Let me see if I'm doing something. Let me go ahead and just click a few additional items here. Seeing if the demo gods are with me again. JJ, that's not nice. That's all right. Okay, the demo gods are not with him, but what you should be able to do, and I may just be clicking in the wrong piece of the code, is that when you generate snapshots live on a particular piece of code, it should give you the entire call stack of all the different variables working within it. That gives you more information on your code, even if there's not an error. Now, this is where I tend to want to lean on Ben or someone who has more of a developer background with that. Let me actually go ahead and link how to get more into the debugger call stack as well. Let's see here. I'll be completely honest, it's not my biggest area of expertise, but it talks about how to take a debug snapshot. You can set conditions for it. This is what your output would be if I was using it correctly. And you can go ahead and filter down by conditions and expressions from there. Yes, you can do that for live debugging. And you get more information from there. Hope the debug doesn't show any secret passwords. Hopefully you don't have secret passwords in your code. That's probably not the best practice. I'm not 100% certain on that, so it is a very good question. Okay, so I have finished things to talk about today. Next week for our very last session, I'm thinking about going a deep dive into Cloud Data Prep, which I demonstrated very briefly last week, which is a really cool tool to basically create a click-and-point web interface for a managed cloud data flow pipeline for basically taking garbage data, essentially, and processing it and cleaning it up and making it a lot more usable. I did like a very quick 10-minute demo last week that people seem to like, and it's really neat. I kind of want to go into a lot further, kind of see all the really cool stuff you can do. That could change depending on what do people suggest. I'm kind of leaning toward that for next week for a data prep for our very last session. All right, well, I have ran out of stuff to talk about. Thank you all for joining. Again, we have our forms for suggesting anything. If you don't want to see me doing data prep, but want to see me do something else for our very last session, let me go ahead and link to you the form to suggest that. I'm going to go ahead and bring it up off screen and send you the link real quick. Yeah, data prep's pretty cool. Unless someone has like a really other cool topic in mind, we're probably going to go ahead and do that. Go ahead and suggest something anyways. But we're probably going to do data prep anyway. That's going to go ahead and wrap it up here. Thank you all for joining. I'm going to go ahead and leave chat open here for a few minutes. I've been saying if you have multiple services, you get one App Engine app per project. Yes, and a single app can have multiple services, I believe. If you need to have multiple applications, I believe you can link them across projects too. I'll defer to Ben on that one as well. Thank you all for joining once again. This is going to be available for recording probably just a few minutes after I'm done with the live stream. So if you just go to the Linux Academy YouTube channel, you can pull up everything you need on there and you can see it as well. Thank you all for joining. Go ahead and leave chat up for a few minutes. Otherwise, I will see you all next Thursday for more than likely data prep. And I will see you then.